The sun was beginning to set over Manila, casting a golden glow across the open-air arena where a charity sports festival was underway. Families filled the seats, celebrities mingled near the stage, and the atmosphere buzzed with laughter, music, and excitement. In the center of it all stood Manny Pacquiao, smiling, relaxed, entertaining the crowd like only he could. On the opposite side of the stage, Steven Seagal arrived quietly. No grand entrance, no spotlight. He wore simple black training clothes, his posture calm and steady. Though many recognized him instantly, he carried a gentle humility, nodding, shaking hands, greeting fans softly. A host with a microphone boomed, "Ladies and gentlemen, a fun boxing demo between two legends, Manny Pacquiao and Steven Seagal." The crowd erupted. Phones shot into the air. Children stood on chairs. Manny looked across at Steven and chuckled lightly. "Sensei Seagal, ready to show us some moves?" he said in a playful tone loud enough for everyone to hear. Steven smiled politely. "Just here to support the charity, champ." Manny stepped forward, bouncing on his toes, throwing a few quick shadow jabs to hype the audience. The crowd cheered with excitement. Manny grinned and pointed towards Steven with a teasing smirk. "Come on, don't be shy. Let's see the Hollywood punches." People laughed, thinking it was all a harmless joke. Steven, however, didn't react much. He folded his hands calmly in front of him, watching Manny with a patient expression. He didn't get annoyed. He didn't get competitive. He simply observed. Manny laughed again, good-natured but undeniably dismissive. Even some audience members joined in, whispering things like, "Seagal? Boxing? Let's see if he still has it. He's too old for this now." The host signaled for them to step into the small demonstration ring. Manny bounced in confidently, waving at the cheering crowd. Steven walked in slowly, quietly, almost like a monk entering a meditation space. The cameraman zoomed in. Fans leaned forward. Manny raised his pads and playfully nudged Steven. "Okay, sensei. Show us what you've got." Steven inhaled slowly, feet planting firmly, posture transforming in an instant. But the moment Steven threw his first punch, the entire crowd forgot how to breathe. The crowd was buzzing already, expecting a light-hearted show. Manny joking around, Steven smiling politely, a couple of slow-motion movie punches for laughs. Nothing more. But as Steven squared up, the energy shifted just slightly, just enough for those in the front row to lean in. Manny noticed it too. "Relax, sensei," he said jokingly. "This is just for fun." Steven nodded, expression unchanged. "Of course." Manny lifted the mitts again and widened his stance, warming up his shoulders. "All right, ladies and gentlemen," he announced loudly, playing to the crowd. "Let's see Seagal's legendary technique. You ready?" A wave of applause swept the arena. Steven took one slow step closer, measured, grounded, steady. His movements were nothing flashy, but there was a quiet weight behind them, like someone who knew exactly what their body was doing. Manny exhaled with a grin. "Okay, sensei. Light jab. Let's start simple." Steven didn't respond verbally. He simply lifted his hands, tested the distance, and prepared to punch. Meanwhile, the audience began pulling out their phones. A group of teenage boys in the third row leaned forward eagerly. "Record this," one whispered. "This is gonna be funny." Even some media reporters along the stage perimeter smiled, expecting pure entertainment. Manny bounced lightly on his toes. "Go ahead." Steven launched his first jab. Slow, soft, clearly just a warm-up. It landed on the mitt with a gentle thud. Manny nodded approvingly and turned to the crowd. "See? Not bad," he joked, waving the mitt theatrically. People laughed again. Steven didn't laugh. He just reset, hands by his face, waiting for the next command. Manny smirked. Okay, serious now. Give me a real one." The crowd leaned forward. Steven didn't rush. He exhaled, shifted his hips, and prepared himself silently. Manny rolled his shoulders, stable and ready. "All right," Manny said. "Hit the left mitt." One strong jab. Steven nodded once. Then, whack. The sound echoed through the arena. Not loud, not flashy, but impossibly sharp. Manny's glove jolted backward harder than he expected, forcing him to take a tiny step to keep balance. The crowd gasped, audible, unified, shocked. One woman shouted, "Oh my God!" A man in the back yelled, "Did you see that?" Someone else screamed, "Replay! Replay!" Manny blinked hard. The smile slipped off his face for a moment, replaced by something he rarely showed in public: surprise. He glanced at Steven. Steven hadn't moved aggressively. He simply delivered a clean, precise jab with perfect efficiency. No wasted motion. No theatrics. Manny shook his hand gently, the sting tingling through his wrist. "You weren't joking," he muttered. Steven bowed his head respectfully. "You asked for a real one, champ." The crowd roared again. Suddenly the mood changed. This wasn't comedy anymore. This wasn't a celebrity cameo moment. This was a genuine martial artist demonstrating real technique, smooth, refined, and controlled. But Manny, being Manny, wasn't about to be outdone so easily. He broke into a grin, this time not mocking but impressed. "All right," he said, nodding. "Let's go again." Steven prepared to strike. Manny raised the mitts, more focused now, no more playful wiggles or exaggerated gestures. The audience quieted to a soft hush, waiting. Steven threw another punch, a crisp cross this time, and again the sound cracked through the arena like a whip. Manny's arm jolted backward harder than before. He nodded in acknowledgement. The crowd exploded. "He's strong. That's real power. Steven's legit." But there were still a few voices laughing nervously, not ready to believe what they were seeing. Manny lowered the mitts and looked Steven in the eyes, not with teasing amusement, but with genuine respect developing. "You surprised me," Manny admitted. Steven smiled faintly. "I'm not a boxer, but I've trained a long time." Manny laughed, not dismissively this time, more like a man realizing he misjudged an opponent. "Okay, sensei. I see you." The crowd applauded again, louder and louder. The cameras zoomed in. Kids stood on their chairs. Influencers shouted, trying to get a better angle. This friendly demonstration had just turned into the most unexpected highlight of the entire event. Engagement break. Do you think Manny was being playful or disrespectful at the start? Comment below. And tell us where you're watching this story from, your city and country. The stage was set. The tension was rising. And the next punches were going to change everything. The energy in the arena shifted from playful amusement to electric anticipation. What began as a fun celebrity moment was slowly transforming into something far more captivating. Manny Pacquiao held the mitts with a seriousness that wasn't there a few minutes ago, and Steven Seagal stood across from him with the calm composure of a lifelong martial artist, silent, grounded, unshakable. The crowd sensed the shift too. Conversations quieted. Phones lifted higher. Camera lenses zoomed in. Manny exhaled sharply, rolling his shoulders. "All right, sensei. Let's bring it up just a little. Show me a 1-2. Steven nodded once. No showmanship, no dramatics. Just readiness. Manny braced himself. Steven slid forward half a step and delivered the combination. Jab, cross, but this time the punches weren't soft, warm-up strikes. They were sharp, clean, and perfectly aligned. The impact rattled the mitts and sent a muscle-deep shock up Manny's arm. Manny's eyebrows shot up. The crowd gasped again. One man yelled, "That was fast." Another shouted, "Replay that. Replay." Someone in the front row swore loudly in disbelief. Manny steadied himself. His arm throbbed slightly, not from pain but from the sudden force. He gave Steven a curious look, half impressed, half stunned. "You're telling me you don't box?" Manny asked. Steven shrugged lightly. "Never claimed to be a boxer. But power, that's universal." The crowd erupted. People started chanting Steven's name. Even some of Manny's own fans were laughing in shock. Manny wasn't offended. If anything, he looked excited. He loved challenges, loved surprises, and he respected power wherever it came from. "Okay," Manny said with a grin forming again, this time the real kind. "Let's go one more time." But inside, Manny was recalculating. This wasn't the slow, stiff movie punching people expected from Steven. This was technique backed by real training and decades of discipline. Manny lifted the pads again. Before he could give the command, Steven threw a short, compact body shot into the mitt. Perfect angle, perfect depth, perfectly balanced hip rotation. Thump. The sound was deeper, heavier than the previous strikes. Manny jerked backward, eyes wide. The crowd shrieked. One kid shouted, "Holy, he's stronger than he looks." A teenage girl yelled, "That was crazy." Reporters stood up from their seats, scribbling and recording simultaneously. Manny lowered the mitts slowly. "That wasn't light," Manny said, laughing breathlessly. Steven bowed his head respectfully. "That was controlled." Manny blinked. "Controlled?" Steven nodded. "Very controlled." The arena reacted in a wave of laughter and stunned applause. At this point, Manny's competitive side awakened. He wasn't angry, just curious. How much power did the man really have? How deep did his technique go? Was this just a surprising moment? Or was Steven actually holding something back? Manny tightened the mitt straps. Give me the strongest punch you're comfortable throwing. The crowd hollered. Phones angled higher. Even the hosts on stage seemed frozen, unsure how serious the moment was becoming. Steven looked at Manny, not with arrogance but with a respectful seriousness. You sure? He asked quietly. Manny nodded. I'm the one asking. Steven stepped back slightly. Centered himself. Breathed deep. The entire arena fell silent as he shifted into a stance that looked nothing like Hollywood choreography. This was real martial arts posture, low, balanced, explosive. He moved. Crack. The punch landed so hard on the mitt that Manny's body tilted sideways despite his world-class stability. His eyes widened so dramatically that the front rows burst into shocked laughter. The sound echoed through the arena like someone hit a drum with a metal bat. The crowd lost its mind. What was that? No way. I can't believe this. Seagal is not playing around. Manny shook out his arm, laughing, disbelief radiating off him. He looked at Steven with genuine shock and admiration. Sensei, that was real power, Manny said, still smiling. Steven simply bowed again. Thank you. But Manny wasn't done. He lifted the mitts one last time and said, all right. Show them something small. Something quick. Something only a real technician can do. Steven lifted an eyebrow. Only if you're ready. Manny braced himself. Steven stepped forward and unleashed a short, almost invisible punch. The kind of compression strike only highly trained martial artists can deliver. It hit the mitt like a hammer dropped from above. Manny stumbled back a full step. The arena erupted. Nobody laughed now. Nobody doubted him. Nobody called it movie fighting anymore. If you were Manny and felt that kind of power, would you laugh it off, or take it seriously? Tell us in the comments. And just like that, everything changed. Manny Pacquiao wasn't testing Steven Seagal anymore. He was studying him. The arena was now alive with a completely different energy. One thick with surprise, curiosity, and growing admiration. Moments ago the crowd expected jokes, memes, lighthearted fun. Now they leaned forward as if witnessing the beginning of an unexpected legend. Manny lowered the mitts and shook out his hands again, feeling the residual sting from Steven's last strike. He wasn't hurt, he was impressed. Truly impressed. And Manny Pacquiao didn't get impressed easily. Nearby, a teenage boy tugged on his father's sleeve. Dad. Steven Seagal trains real martial arts, right? Like for real? His father nodded proudly as if he'd been waiting for this moment. Son, that man trained under real masters. People forget because of Hollywood, but he was always the real deal. The boy's eyes widened. And Manny is just realizing it now? Oh, he realized, the father said with a knowing smile. Look at him. And indeed, everyone was looking at Manny. The playful grin he'd worn at the beginning had faded into something more focused, more analytical. He wasn't teasing anymore. He was calculating, studying, respecting. The host stepped forward hesitantly, unsure whether to interrupt or let them continue. Manny waved him off with a quick flick of his hand, never taking his eyes off Steven. The crowd murmured with rising excitement. A group of influencers in the front row exchanged astonished glances. Dude, this is insane, one whispered. This wasn't supposed to be serious. Bro, this is better than serious, another replied, barely containing his excitement. This is history. Manny stepped a little closer to Steven. All right, sensei. Show me something different. Something from your art. Steven's expression softened. Aikido isn't about punching. It's about balance, movement, redirection. Manny lifted his chin with interest. Then show me that. I want the people to see. The crowd roared, some chanting Manny's name, others chanting Steven's. Steven took a breath and moved into a relaxed stance, arms loose but ready. Manny shifted into a boxer's stance, bouncing lightly on his toes, gloves up but friendly. Try to push me, Steven said calmly. Manny blinked. Push you. Steven nodded once. Go ahead. Manny placed both gloved hands on Steven's chest and pushed lightly, not wanting to disrespect the older man. Steven didn't move an inch. Harder, Steven said. Manny pushed again, harder this time. Steven absorbed it effortlessly, grounding himself like a tree rooted into the earth. The crowd hollered. No way. He didn't budge. How is he doing that? Manny looked confused and a little intrigued. Okay, now you push me. Steven didn't push. He placed a single palm on Manny's shoulder, looked him in the eyes and gently rotated his wrist in a subtle circular motion. Manny's body shifted, barely, but enough to show he was being guided off balance. The crowd reacted instantly. Oh my God. He moved Manny without even trying. That's real technique. Manny stepped back, laughing in disbelief. I wasn't expecting that. Steven bowed his head respectfully. There's a lot people don't expect. The teen from earlier whispered loudly to his friends. He's humble too. This is crazy. Slowly, the recognition spread through the crowd like wildfire. Steven Seagal wasn't trying to outshine Manny. He wasn't performing. He wasn't boasting. He was simply demonstrating what he had spent decades mastering. And that humility, combined with undeniable skill, made the crowd even more vocal. The chants started again, louder than before. Seagal, Seagal, Seagal. Manny, Manny, Manny. It was an unexpected harmony, two legends being cheered with equal enthusiasm. Manny raised the mitts once more. Let's give them something special, Sensei. One more technique. Your choice. Steven hesitated, then nodded. He placed his hands gently around Manny's wrist, demonstrating a simple Aikido lock, slow and controlled. Manny tried to pull back, just enough to test it. He couldn't. Steven tightened the angle by barely a fraction and Manny felt his knees soften instinctively, following the pressure to avoid strain. The crowd exploded again. He got him. Seagal got Manny. That's real martial arts. But the moment Steven felt tension, he immediately released Manny's wrist, stepping back respectfully. Manny shook his hand out and laughed, not embarrassed but amazed. That was good. Very good. Steven nodded. Thank you for trusting me. The sincerity in his tone struck the audience deeply. This wasn't ego. This wasn't showboating. This was two masters exchanging art, with the world watching. The arena felt united, breathless, hungry for more. And what came next would be even bigger. The referee's hand sliced through the air. Fight. The crowd roared, but then fell into an uneasy silence, like they weren't sure what they were about to witness. Manny Pacquiao, relaxed and loose, began to circle Steven Seagal with the smooth, controlled footwork of a man who had spent his life dancing inside the ropes. Steven, however, didn't move the way a boxer normally would. He wasn't bouncing. He wasn't twitching for angles. He stood rooted, shoulders loose, hands down, almost motionless. People in the front rows whispered nervously. He's too stiff. He's gonna get knocked out. But Steven wasn't tense. He was calculating. Manny took the initiative, stepping in with a light probing jab. Nothing serious, just a feeler. Steven tilted his head slightly, letting the glove pass by without even lifting a hand. The crowd reacted with a quiet ripple of surprise. Manny smirked. All right. So you're awake. He flicked another jab, then another, faster. Steven didn't flinch. His eyes were locked on Manny's hips, his stance, the direction of his weight. He was studying patterns the way he'd studied thousands of attackers in dojos around the world. But the audience didn't understand that. To them he looked slow, outdated, a man out of his era. And Manny, the 8-division world champion, began turning up the pace. His gloves whipped through the air in blurred combinations, still light but now carrying intent. Tap tap, tap tap tap. Steven blocked one with an open palm, an Aikido redirection strange for a boxing ring. A few people laughed again. The commentators chuckled into their microphones. Even the referee cracked a small smile. Then it happened. Manny stepped in with a quick lead hook, the kind he often used to measure distance before launching something bigger. But the moment he shifted weight onto his lead foot, Steven's eyes sharpened. He saw it. A tiny opening. A fraction of timing. A mistake no one else in the arena noticed. Manny's glove hadn't even completed the arc when Steven's body suddenly snapped with a speed that contradicted everything about his size, his age, his stiffness. Steven's right hand didn't swing wide. It didn't loop. It launched in a perfectly straight line, like a piston firing. Puck. The sound wasn't huge, but it was sharp. Too sharp. A clean connection straight to Manny's solar plexus. Manny's expression froze. His breath caught. His footwork broke. The punch didn't look dramatic to the crowd. It wasn't a knockout blow, but experts instantly recognized it. A precise body strike delivered with surgical timing, landing exactly when Manny inhaled during the hook's motion. Manny stumbled one step back. Not in exaggeration. Not playfully. But involuntarily. The arena gasped. What was that? Did Pacquiao actually move back? No way. Did Seagal time him? Even the commentators suddenly fell silent, their sarcastic tone replaced by surprise. Manny regained his breath, raised his eyebrows, and nodded slowly. It wasn't mockery. It was respect. Okay, that was real. Steven didn't celebrate. He simply lowered his hand again, breathing calmly through his nose, watching Manny with the relaxed steadiness of someone who knew he had made a point, not to dominate, not to win, but to be taken seriously. The crowd's entire mood shifted. Moments earlier they had laughed at him, mocked him, dismissed him. Now, there was a strange electricity in the air. A tension, a curiosity. People leaned forward. Voices quieted. Phones stopped recording and began watching. Steven Seagal had just done something everyone said was impossible. He landed a clean, timed, professional-level counter on one of the greatest fighters in boxing history. No fancy spinning kick. No dramatic movie move. Just pure timing, reading, and pressure point accuracy, something only a master of hands-on combat could do. And Manny Pacquiao, now fully serious, reset his stance, shook his arms loose, and gave Steven a small smile. "You got my attention now," Manny whispered. Steven responded in his usual calm, deep voice. "I know." The arena had no idea what was coming next. The crowd was buzzing now, no laughter, no snickering. The air felt different. Manny Pacquiao rolled his shoulders, loosened his neck, and settled into a stance not meant for play, not for demonstration, but for respect. For the first time since the exhibition began, Manny looked like Manny Pacquiao, the legend who fought giants and never backed down. His eyes sharpened, his steps shortened, and the lightness in his movements transformed into the unmistakable rhythm of a man who had fought 12-round wars. Steven recognized it instantly. "Now we fight," Manny said quietly. Steven nodded. "Now we show." The referee glanced nervously between them. This wasn't supposed to be competitive. It was meant to be friendly, controlled, safe. But something had shifted, something the referee couldn't stop even if he wanted to. The two fighters closed distance. Manny initiated first, this time with speed. A real jab. Snappy. Purposeful. Steven parried it with the heel of his palm, redirecting the line rather than blocking it. The crowd murmured again. Then Manny launched a lightning-quick 1-2. Steven twisted, avoiding the cross by inches, his shoulders turning with smooth Aikido minimalism. Manny smiled. "You're reading me." Steven replied calmly, "I've been reading fighters my whole life." But Manny wasn't slowing down. He fired another combination. Jab, cross, lead hook, body shot. The rhythm was sudden, unpredictable, and beautifully fast, Pacquiao style. Steven blocked some, avoided others, but a sharp hook grazed his temple. The crowd exploded. That wasn't fake. That wasn't rehearsed. That was real impact. Steven blinked once, steadying himself, then let out a slow breath through his nose. Manny paused for a brief second, half checking, half testing. "You okay?" "Hit me," Steven said simply. Manny lowered his stance. Then he unleashed. A flurry, Pacquiao's signature burst, 5 punches in less than a second. Steven managed to redirect the first 2, absorbed the third on his shoulder and slipped the fourth. But the fifth, a sneaky rear uppercut, clipped his guard and thudded into his chest. The arena vibrated with cheers and disbelief. Manny wasn't trying to hurt him, he was asserting rhythm, speed, pressure. Steven stepped back, his boots thumping softly against the canvas. The contrast between styles was astonishing. Manny, fast, explosive, unpredictable. Steven, calm, measured, reading angles. 2 completely different worlds colliding. And something remarkable happened. The more Manny attacked, the more Steven's movement began sinking. Not with boxing rhythm, but with energy patterns the way he trained for decades. He wasn't reacting to punches, he was reacting to intention. Manny noticed it too. "You're not fighting by my rules," Manny said, circling. "I'm fighting by no one's rules," Steven answered. The crowd leaned in. Then Steven made a move no one expected. He stepped toward Manny, cutting off the angle, not with boxing footwork but with an effortless, gliding shift of weight that closed distance instantly. Manny blinked. Whoa. Steven didn't throw a punch. He placed his left hand gently on Manny's glove, guiding it down, then used his right forearm to brush Manny's lead hand to the side, an Aikido entry adapted for gloves. The maneuver was so smooth, so strangely elegant, that the crowd gasped in confusion. What did he just do? He redirected Pacquiao like nothing. Is that even legal? Manny's eyes widened, not offended, not threatened. Impressed. That's different, Manny said breathlessly. Steven replied, you fight with speed. I fight with intention. They reset. Manny bounced lightly again, determined to regain rhythm. Steven stood still yet somehow ready. Then Manny tried something more calculated, a trap. He feinted a jab, expecting Steven to parry, then cocked a lead hook intended to land clean when Steven exposed himself. But Steven didn't parry. He stepped inside the feint, pivoted a few inches to the right, and tapped Manny's elbow with the side of his glove. The tiny contact disrupted Manny's momentum, not painful, just enough to divert the punch. The crowd erupted again, not because it looked flashy but because it looked impossible. How did he stop that hook? He neutralized it without blocking. That wasn't luck, that was technique. For the first time in several minutes, Manny took a step back, not in fear but admiration. He breathed in, smiled, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "You're not just an actor, Steven." Steven gave a small nod, the faintest smirk touching his lips. "You all forgot," he said quietly, "but I didn't." The bell sounded. End of round. The crowd rose to its feet, roaring for a fight that was never meant to be a fight at all. And the world had no idea what the final round would bring. The bell echoed through the arena, but the sound barely registered over the roar of the crowd. People were on their feet, shouting, whistling, chanting both men's names. The charity event had become something no one expected. A legendary exchange between two icons, one from the world of boxing and the other from martial arts cinema. Manny Pacquiao wiped the sweat from his brow, breathing deep, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Across from him, Steven Seagal stood still, hardly moving, his breathing quiet, almost meditative. The contrast between them was electric. One a storm, the other a mountain. The host shouted over the microphone, "Final round. One last demo, make it memorable." The crowd screamed. Manny smiled, bouncing lightly on his toes again. "You ready, sensei?" Steven nodded. "Show me what the heart of a champion really looks like." The two touched gloves with genuine respect. No showmanship, no ego. Then the round began. Manny launched forward first, his speed sharp and rhythmic. He tested Steven with probing jabs, each one faster than the last. Steven deflected most of them, redirecting angles rather than blocking straight on. It was art meeting aggression. Then Manny escalated. A body feint. A sharp step in. A clean cross aimed at Steven's guard. Steven absorbed it, sliding his weight back just enough. Manny followed with a hook. Steven weaved. Manny pivoted, sending a right to the ribs. Steven caught it on his elbow. The crowd couldn't believe what they were seeing. "This is insane. He's really keeping up with Pacquiao. No way this is choreographed." Manny stepped back briefly, hands on his hips, laughing through his heavy breaths. "You're full of surprises." Steven lowered his chin slightly. "You stopped underestimating me. Now the match is real." Manny nodded. "Okay, then let's make it count." He tightened his gloves, slid into the stance that made him a world champion, and shifted his weight to unleash the punch. A clean, textbook, explosive left straight. The kind that had dropped legends. He fired it. The crowd saw the speed, blur fast, laser precise. But Steven saw something else. A rhythm. A pattern. A fraction of a second tell. In an instant that almost looked unreal, Steven didn't block. He didn't retreat. He stepped inside the punch, angling at just the right degree, and placed his palm on Manny's wrist while sweeping his other arm across Manny's centerline. The movement was soft, effortless. And it completely redirected Manny's power. Manny stumbled half a step, not hurt, just shocked. The punch had vanished like throwing a rock into empty air. The entire arena gasped. What was that? He canceled the punch. How is that even possible? Steven didn't counter with force. He didn't hit Manny. Instead, with surgical precision, he placed two fingers against Manny's glove and pushed gently at the perfect angle, turning Manny around by sheer technique and balance mechanics. Manny spun lightly, corrected himself, and burst out laughing. "I didn't see that coming." Steven bowed his head slightly. "That is the first punch you've ever thrown that had no intention to hurt, so I treated it like a lesson, not a threat." The respect hit the crowd like a wave. Cheers erupted, thunderous, endless. Manny raised Steven's hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, he may be an actor, but he's also a real martial artist. Don't ever doubt that." Steven shook his head humbly. "And he is a true champion, in skill and in heart." Camera flashes popped from every angle. Fans chanted both their names together. "Manny York. Vijo. Manny York. Seagal." The host stepped forward, overwhelmed. Tonight was supposed to be charity fun, but it turned into something unforgettable. Manny put an arm around Steven's shoulder. "People compare boxing and martial arts all the time. But tonight you saw something simple. He raised his fist to the audience. Real fighters respect real fighters. The crowd roared again, rising in applause that shook the entire arena. Steven smiled, rare, warm, genuine. And Manny added one final line. Never judge a fighter by style, age, or appearance. Power can fade, but skill? Skill stays forever. The lights dimmed slowly as the two men exited the ring together, laughing, talking, united by combat and honor. The video went viral within hours. Millions watched the moment Manny threw the punch. And Steven Seagal made the world gasp.